And that is the perfect segue to this week's Power Rankings, presented by our friends at Toyota, as we take a look at the very top 5 one-loss teams. And because both the 49ers and Eagles picked up their first losses, they necessarily fall. I struggled with who to make number one. I ultimately went with the Dolphins because the Dolphins have the offense that the Chiefs wish they had. That's the difference between the top 3 teams. I also struggled with 2 and 3. Should I bump the Lions over the Chiefs? After all, the Lions beat the Chiefs, but the Chiefs have won 5 in a row, and the Chiefs were 1 spot higher. So I put the Dolphins ahead of the Chiefs. They jumped the Chiefs. They may have also, I don't think they jumped the Lions, but they definitely jumped the Chiefs to get to number 1. But who knows? Who knows? At the very top, with the teams that have 1 loss, especially the top 3, any of the 3 could be number 1, Charean.
I still like the 49ers, and the reason is simple. They played a historically great defense, and I think we still saw that defense is going to beat offense. And maybe that would have changed if Devo had played the whole game, Christian McCaffrey hadn't gotten hurt, Trent Williams hadn't been a little gimpy. Maybe all those things changed the 49ers, but the Browns did a great job against them. Brock Purdy still put them in position to win that game. They should have won that game. If not for the rookie kicker, they win that game. So I still like the 49ers among those top 5 teams. But after their first loss, I think you move a team up, and the Dolphins offense, it just seems unstoppable. I'd like to I don't know if do the Dolphins and Browns play. I hope they do.
I'd have to check that. We'll check that schedule as we continue to meander through these power rankings. And, there's an element of the old UPI and AP college football poll that factors into this for me. And I used to love seeing that poll Monday morning in the newspapers during college football season. And if you were number 1 and you lost, you never stayed at number 1. You just didn't. Now, the reality was there were 7 other unbeaten teams ready to take over. The challenge here is there's no other unbeaten team to take over the top spot. But if you lose at number 1, like I don't remember a time that losing at number 1 ever allowed you to stay at number 1. You lost. You were the king of the hill, and you got knocked off. You necessarily fall, and you climb back up as you win and others lose. The Dolphins could lose on Sunday night to the Eagles on NBC and Peacock, by the way. The Chiefs could lose to the Chargers on Sunday. The Lions go to Baltimore. I mean, the 49ers could be number 1 next Tuesday again. If the 3 teams in front of them lose and they win, they'll be number 1 again. And the Eagles will be number 2 because they will have beaten the Dolphins. So it's kind of good to see the top 3 teams this week. Nobody's got an easy win. They're all going to be tested. They're all going to have to earn that spot by beating teams. Even though the Chargers are sub 500, the Chargers are the one team in the AFC West that can give the Chiefs fits.
Well, I'm a little disappointed, Mike, because the Dolphins and Browns do not play, and I would really love to see that defense against that offense to see what they could do after what they did against the 49ers, because I like where the Browns are right now with that defense. We'll see what they can do in offense. We'll see if Deshaun Watson comes back. But there's some teams, I think, this week that made some moves. You had the Jaguars moving up. Cowboys moved up. Some teams made some moves this week and looked a little better than they have in previous weeks. So I think that's kind of exciting. The thing that I see on here is some teams moved up in your rankings this week because of the way they played.
We're only 6 weeks removed from the build-up to the first game of the season. And it struck me harder this year than ever before as the season approached, how difficult it is to make predictions, to make power rankings, because when everyone is 0-0, the passionate fans of every team get so indignant when you point out the reality. Somebody's going to be 32. Somebody's going to be 31. Somebody's got to be bad. There's 272 games. There's going to be 272 games won, 272 games lost, barring ties. So for every good team, there's going to be a bad team. And when you look at the cluster at the bottom, I mean, we've got 6, 7, 8, maybe 9 really good teams, maybe 10 really good teams. I'll go 10 if we look at the top 10. 10 really good teams, and then at the back end, I mean, the Patriots are a disaster. The Panthers are a disaster. The Broncos are a disaster. The Giants are a disaster. The Cardinals are a disaster. The Bears are a disaster. And the Titans are pretty damn close to being a disaster too, Charean.
Yeah, all of that, Mike. And then you got the cluster of the teams in the middle. The team that really stands out to me on this when you talk about beginning the season to where we are now is the Texans. At 14, they are in playoff contention. Never in 100,000 years did I think that we'd be talking about the Texans being in playoff contention. 13-1 last season. They're 3-3, Mike, sitting there in a division that they actually have a chance, maybe not to win, but at least to contend for, and to contend for one of those playoff spots. C.J. Stroud is playing that well right now. DeMeco Ryans, if we were going to name a coach of the year, he's coach of the year today, if we're going to name a coach of the year.
The Texans have already beaten the Jaguars by 20, and they're the only team in the AFC South that I think at this point could give the Jaguars a run for their money, and they very well might. And, you know, a couple of years ago, we made the mistake of doing a draft before the season of the teams that had no chance to make the playoffs. And, of course, one of mine was the Cincinnati Bengals, who almost won the Super Bowl that year. This year we didn't do it because there weren't 6 teams that stood out. But the one team that did was the Texans. That was the one team that was like, they have no chance. And maybe the Raiders.
Yeah.
And they're both 3-3. They're both 3-3, and they're both very much alive for postseason possibilities. And, you know, in the NFC, that's where you've got a couple of these teams, which is like Panthers, Giants, Bears, Cardinals, no chance, no chance, no chance, no chance. But who would have thought the Patriots would fall off as badly as they did? And the Broncos, especially because Sean Payton, one of the many things he said to Jarrett Bell of USA Today, I'll be pissed if we don't make it to the playoffs. Well, get ready to be pissed because you're 1-5, and there's no sign it's going to get any better. But you're right about the Texans. Pleasant surprise this year. Still 11 games to go for most of the teams. 12 for the ones who have had their byes already. 6 teams are off this week. I hate those weekends with a bunch of teams off. But everybody gets 1 week off between week 1 and week 18, and we're thick into that process. We're thick into the season. And at least for now, the power rankings are starting to stabilize. We're getting the idea of who the good teams are, the bad teams are. And Charean, last point before we break. One of those teams in the middle, we know what's going to happen. Maybe 2, maybe 3. They're going to get their stuff figured out around Thanksgiving. They're going to start winning games, and they're going to get in late, and they're going to be a force to be reckoned with. And the Rams are one of the teams that I would look at and say, if they find a way in, you don't want to mess with the Rams, not with their playoff experience, not with their great players. If they're healthy, you don't want. If you're the Eagles, the 49ers, the Cowboys, the Lions, you don't want to mess with the Rams when the playoffs roll around.
And guess the Cowboys are on a bye this week, come back and play the Rams next week. I cannot believe that game is a 1 o'clock game, and maybe they end up moving it. I don't think they're going to based on what the schedule looks like. But that to me is a big game next week. We get to see the Cowboys and Rams play each other. And I look at a team like the Bengals, Mike. Joe Burrow's getting healthy. I still think the Bengals are going to be a factor in this thing. I still think they make the playoffs. And they're a team, just like you said of the Rams, they are not a team that you want to play in the postseason. We've seen what they've done in the past 2 postseasons. You don't want to play them in the postseason.
And we're only in the 3rd year of 17 games, so you really don't know when you've lost that one game too many. And we saw a couple of teams last year make a late kick, Steelers and Lions, late run and just missed it. And that's part of this too. There's going to be a team that makes a late run and gets in, and then there's going to be that team that could be even better. You know, there could be a team that by the time we get to January is good enough to win the Super Bowl and just misses because they started too slowly and they weren't able to qualify. But, you know, 5, 6 losses, you're getting closer and closer to you've got to win them all to get in to that 14-team field. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.